All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going all the way up, way up to heaven.
Higher than ever before.
Oh yeah, this is the big one. We are tackling Paradiso, the final canticle of Dante's Divine Comedy.
The grand finale. And we've got quite the spread for this deep dive. You sent over, well, you know those YouTube deep dives by Wendigoon and Hochelaga? Those are always a good time, right? They present some really interesting modern takes.
Right, very accessible.
Yeah, and then we have that good solid base from Wikipedia.
Yep.
And of course we have the big kahuna selection straight from Dante's Paradiso from the Online Library of Liberty.
The source itself, the verses that started it all. So what exactly are we hoping to accomplish with all of this today?
Well, we are going to attempt to map out, to make sense of, Dante's vision of heaven. Specifically, we're going to follow his journey through those first 7 celestial spheres.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. 7 out of 9. Right. Now, you mentioned that you really like acquiring knowledge quickly, efficiently, but you also don't want to skim over the details. And, I think that's something we do really well here. And those aha moments, right? We're aiming for those light bulb moments as we unpack these really complicated ideas in Paradiso. I mean, let's be honest, Paradiso can be a lot to take in.
It can be dense.
But we're here to distill it, make those core ideas crystal clear, hopefully entertaining too.
Absolutely. So, what are we waiting for? Let's start that ascent. Dante, guided by his muse, Beatrice, they ascend through 9 celestial spheres. And each one of these spheres, well, it's tied to a specific virtue, and they're populated by souls embodying those virtues.
That's right. It's not just, fluffy clouds and harps. There's a very clear structure. So for our deep dive today, we're going to climb through the moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Buckle up. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
Quite a journey ahead.
It is. All right, first up, the moon. Wendigoon. He pointed out that the souls we meet here, like Picarda, they're those who, they didn't completely fulfill their vows, maybe because of external pressures or circumstances beyond their control, but, and here's the hicker, they're still in heaven. So what do you think? What does this tell us about how Dante views divine justice? Is it as straightforward as we might initially assume?
I mean, that's a great place to start. And Picarda, she tells Dante in the text, she actually says, everyone in heaven is happy in the place God has assigned them. So there's this underlying, contentment, a sense of being in alignment with God's will. It's regardless of their specific level in heaven, but still it's paradise. So maybe it's saying that, even those imperfect efforts towards virtue, those are acknowledged. Yeah, they still have a place within the grand scheme of things. Wikipedia, straightforwardly points out that, these are souls who didn't quite keep their vows. And that imagery in the text, Dante seeing faint reflections of faces, like in polished glass or shallow water, that really emphasizes this sense of something not quite fully realized in their earthly lives. But Beatrice, she makes it clear, these are real substances, and they're assigned this place because, as she puts it, of vows not wholly kept. And that really makes you think, how much does Dante weigh intention versus action? What's the balance there?
Right. It's not just about what you do, but why you do it.
Absolutely.
It seems like. Okay, onward and upward to sphere number 2, Mercury.
Mercury.
Wendigoon, he describes Mercury as intensely bright.
Oh, yeah.
Almost dazzling. And it's the dwelling place of souls who, they did good deeds, yes, but they did them with, maybe a bit of an eye on the reward or recognition. They weren't totally selfless. What's the story here?
Well, here we encounter Emperor Justinian. Big name. And Justinian explains that, he accomplished some pretty amazing things. He reformed Roman law. He wanted to, restore the Roman Empire to its former glory. Yeah. But he admits his motives were a little mixed. There was this thirst for personal glory, a desire to cement his legacy, which, who can blame him, right?
Right. It's human nature.
It is. And Hochelaga, they call Mercury the realm of the ambitious. These individuals, like Justinian, who, they did great things. Justinian, think about it. Codifying law, building the Hagia Sophia. But as Hochelaga puts it, their ambition was kind of tainted by a desire for personal glory. And it raises that age-old question. Can good deeds ever truly be, purely self?
Yeah, is pure altruism even possible?
Or are we all driven by, some degree of self-interest?
Right, very interesting. And then this is where things get really interesting. Dante, he asks this really, really thought-provoking question. He asks why Jerusalem was destroyed after Christ's crucifixion. Because, and this is what Dante's struggling with, if Jesus dying on the cross was part of God's plan for salvation, then why punish the people who carried out the plan? It seems contradictory, right?
It does. But Beatrice, she offers this really compelling explanation. She says, and this is important, that the people who killed Jesus, they acted out of malice, out of pure hatred, regardless of what God's ultimate purpose was. So it's like the inherent evil of their actions, that doesn't just disappear, even if it inadvertently served a greater good.
Right.
And as Wendigun points out, she goes on to explain that the crucifixion, it opened up the way for humanity to actively participate in its own salvation. It's not about, excusing the act of killing Jesus, but it's about understanding how it fits into this larger divine narrative. And it's about the significance of free will in choosing salvation. Our choices, our actions, they become meaningful precisely because of that sacrifice and our response to it. It's like this really powerful affirmation that humans have agency even within a divinely ordered universe.
So it's not predetermined, we have a role to play.
Exactly.
Okay, so intent matters, right? That's what we're learning here. All right, next level, sphere number 3, Venus.
Venus.
Wendigan tells us that this sphere is for those who, well, they did good things in life, but they were still pretty heavily influenced by earthly desires, especially love, in its various forms, but particularly romantic love. How does Dante paint this picture for us? What's it like on Venus?
Yeah, so Hochelaga describes Venus as the sphere of those who are guided by love. And importantly, they make a distinction between different types of love.
Okay, so love isn't just one thing.
Right, different flavors. And here we encounter Charles Martel. And remember, Wendigan points out that Charles Martel was actually a friend of Dante's in real life.
Oh, wow, personal connection.
Yeah. And Martel, he talks about the decline of Florence. He's lamenting that. And it's really interesting what he points to as the cause. He says it's people not fulfilling their God-given roles, their true vocations. He gives this example. You have people who are meant to be preachers becoming kings, right? Not sticking to their lane. What do you think about that connection between societal well-being and, individuals fulfilling their specific purpose?
It's fascinating, right? It's this idea that everyone has their own unique role to play.
Yeah.
And when those roles are neglected, it throws things off balance.
Creates disharmony.
Exactly. And then we also meet Cunizza da Romano, and as Wendigan mentions, Cunizza, she's very open about having, pursued earthly pleasures. And Wikipedia, they just simply state that this is the sphere for the spirits of lovers. So Venus, it seems to represent this realm where love, even if it's not, purely directed towards God, it still holds a significant place. It's maybe, it's a step on that journey towards a more transcendent kind of love.
Right.
A love that's still carrying those traces of earthly attachment.
Precisely. All right, let's keep climbing. Next stop. Sphere number 4.
The sun.
Wendigan calls this a turning point in Dante's ascent. It's moving from, those earlier spheres where actions are kind of mixed with self-interest. This is about recognizing acts that are done in service of God. And it's home to those who really dedicated their lives to seeking divine knowledge. So what's the vibe like in this sphere?
Well, it's described as incredibly radiant, almost blindingly bright, which makes sense, right? It's the sphere of intellectual enlightenment. And Dante, he meets some serious heavy hitters here.
Yeah.
We're talking, Thomas Aquinas, Albert the Great, his teacher. And then we have St. Bonaventure identifying this whole constellation of wise souls, Illuminatus, Augustine, Hugh of St. Victor, the list goes on.
It's like a who's who of theological and philosophical giants.
It is. And Hochelaga, they put it beautifully. They call the sun a realm of pure golden light, the home of the wise. And they specifically mention St. Thomas Aquinas, whose Summa Theologica was hugely influential on Dante's own writing and thinking.
Absolutely. And here's what I find really striking. Wendigan points out that St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Siger of Brabant, these two guys who had, very different, even opposing viewpoints back on Earth, they're now side by side in complete harmony.
Really?
Yeah. So what do you think that says about the nature of truth and understanding in Dante's vision of heaven?
I mean, it suggests that even when we disagree, even when we argue the pursuit of truth, it ultimately leads to this kind of unified understanding, in the light of the divine.
Yeah.
Those earthly disagreements, they fade away in the face of a higher truth.
Beautiful. And then Aquinas, he told these stories about St. Francis and St. Dominic. As Wendigan puts it, Francis embodies burning love, while Dominic represents of intelligence, showing that there are, these two distinct paths to God, both equally valid. And then Aquinas talks about St. Francis embracing lady poverty.
Lady poverty.
Yeah, which, as Wendigo clarifies, symbolizes humility, stripping away earthly possessions and focusing on the spiritual. And Wikipedia adds this really powerful detail. This specific hillside, the one they're on in the sun, it's traditionally considered the birthplace of St. Francis.
Right.
So his spirit is literally rooted in this sphere of intellectual and spiritual illumination.
That's beautiful. It really drives home the idea that there are different approaches to faith and knowledge, and they can all lead to that same divine understanding. Okay, next up, sphere number 5, Mars.
Mars?
The red planet. Wendigo tells us this is where we find warriors and martyrs, and get this. The lights of these souls, they form a giant cross, and Dante actually sees the face of Christ within it. That's just, the imagery, it's powerful.
Incredibly potent, and it perfectly embodies, what Wikipedia calls the happiness of heroism. Hochelaga, they say Mars is inhabited by the souls of crusaders, and they're arranged in the form of this massive Greek cross, so that the symbol of, of Christian warfare is front and center. And this is where Dante encounters his great-great-grandfather, Cacciaguida. Wendigo calls him Gramps, which I kind of love.
Gramps, yeah.
So what's the significance of this meeting, of Dante meeting his ancestor?
Well, as we've seen in some of those previous spheres, Cacciaguida, he talks about Florence. He's lamenting its decline. That seems to be a recurring theme.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and Wendigo makes this point. Cacciaguida actually foretells Dante's exile. And we have to remember, even though Dante's writing Paradiso later, that exile, it was a real thing. It was a deeply painful experience for him.
Absolutely. And Cacciaguida, as Wendigo highlights, he actually encourages Dante to write down the truth of what he's seen on his journey through heaven and hell.
Wow.
Even though he knows it's probably going to lead to more hardship for Dante.
That's a lot to ask.
It is. And it emphasizes how much Dante values truth and communicating that truth, no matter the cost.
Right. The truth above all else.
And as Dante gazes at that cross of light, he sees all these figures known for their Christian valor. You have Charlemagne, Roland, these heroes of the faith. And Wikipedia broadens the scope a bit. They say this sphere is for martyrs of religion and altruism. So it's not just about military figures. It's about any kind of ultimate sacrifice for a higher purpose.
Selflessness in the face of, incredible challenges. All right, let's move on to sphere number 6, Jupiter.
Jupiter, the king of the planets.
Wendigo describes these brilliant stars that spell out a phrase from the Book of Wisdom, "Love justice, ye rulers of the earth."
So no question here, this year is for just rulers and judges.
Yeah, upholding justice. Wikipedia calls it the happiness of justice. Hochelaga, they say it's the realm of noble rulers, those who championed righteousness. And the souls here, they come together and they form the shape of an eagle.
An eagle?
Yeah, which, as both Hochelaga and Wikipedia point out, was that ancient symbol of Roman power and imperial justice. And this is where Dante encounters some figures that might raise a few eyebrows.
Oh, okay, who are we talking about?
Trajan.
Yeah. Now, Trajan was a pagan emperor, but there's this popular medieval legend that he converted to Christianity later in life. And then there's Ripheus, a Trojan who was saved by God's grace, despite, not being part of the Christian faith. And Wendigo highlights Dante's confusion here, which makes sense, right? It kind of throws a wrench in the works of a simple, straightforward view of salvation.
Right, like how did these pagan figures end up here in heaven?
Yeah. So the eagle, it actually speaks and explains. As both Wendigo and Wikipedia tell us, Trajan was granted a special dispensation. He was given a chance to know God. And Ripheus, well, his lifelong pursuit of truth, his virtue that led him to divine mercy. And the eagle emphasizes that we can't fully comprehend God's ways, especially when it comes to salvation. God's grace works in mysterious ways.
Right, it's beyond our human understanding.
And Hochelaga points out that this whole situation with Trajan, it prompts this bigger question about the fate of people who lived before Christ.
Right, what about those who never even had the chance to know about Christianity?
Exactly. And the eagle's response, it's pretty profound. The eagle says that believing in Christ, whether you live before or after his time on earth, that's key. But God's mercy, it can extend beyond that. It's a really intriguing idea, isn't it?
It is. It's suggesting that there's this wider scope for salvation than maybe people realized back then, that living a virtuous life, seeking truth, these things can be pathways to God, even outside of, the strict interpretation of Christian doctrine as it existed in Dante's time.
Right. It's about the heart, the intent.
Okay, final stop on our journey today. Sphere number 7, Saturn.
Saturn.
Wendigoon mentions something interesting here. He says, Beatrice, she's no longer smiling. And the reason, well, her radiance has become so intense that it would be overwhelming for Dante to behold. And that really gives you a sense of how close they're getting to the divine, right?
Yeah, it's like they're approaching this blinding light. They describe Saturn as the realm of the contemplatives. So think monks, hermits, anyone dedicated to prayer and deep meditation. And there's this noticeable silence in this sphere, very different from the joyful music we heard in those earlier levels of heaven. Alighieri even jokes that the only sound you might hear is the faint whisper of Saturn's radio waves.
Interesting.
And Dante sees this endless ladder stretching upwards. And there are all these lights descending, which are the souls of those who embraced discipline, self-denial, especially through monastic vows.
And we encounter some significant figures here, don't we? Wendigoon mentions that this sphere is specifically for those who lived lives of rigorous discipline and abstinence. And the text itself describes Beatrice warning Dante, saying, look, I'm about to become much brighter, be prepared.
Yeah.
And then we meet Peter Damian. Wendigoon points out that he speaks very passionately about his devotion to God, but he also really criticizes the corruption that he saw within the church.
Right, he doesn't hold back.
He doesn't. And then there's Benedict of Nursia, who, as Wendigoon points out, laments the decline of his own monastic order.
Yeah. And Wikipedia confirms Saturn as the sphere of the contemplatives. It's the home of those monks and hermits.
Yeah.
And that image of the golden ladder reaching downwards, as Alighieri highlights, it's really striking. It symbolizes that connection between the contemplative life and the descent of divine grace. So even in these highest reaches of heaven, Dante's acknowledging those ongoing struggles, those imperfections within religious institutions.
Yeah, there's this honesty, this realism that runs through Dante's whole vision. It's not all just, sunshine and rainbows.
Definitely not.
It's complex, it's nuanced. So even in just these first 7 spheres, Dante's given us this incredibly rich and layered picture of the afterlife.
It's incredible, really. And think about the journey we've just taken. We've climbed through these first levels of paradise,
right,
seeing how Dante connects specific virtues, specific actions from our earthly lives to these distinct celestial realms. And he's constantly wrestling with these big, profound questions. Divine justice, the pathways to salvation, the very nature of divine reward. And as you mentioned earlier, that recurring image of Beatrice's radiance increasing as they ascend, it's beautiful. It symbolizes that growing closeness to God, that increasing holiness.
And some of the details, they just stick with you, like those pagan figures, Trajan and Ripheus and Jupiter.
Yeah.
That really challenges us to rethink any simplistic ideas about salvation.
Absolutely.
And the fact that former intellectual rivals like Aquinas and Siger are now in harmony in the sun.
Yeah.
That offers this hopeful vision of unity in the pursuit of truth. And even in the moon, the souls who didn't perfectly fulfill their vows, they still find a place.
Yeah.
It speaks to, a merciful and nuanced divine plan. And remember what Wendigoon said, a lot of this is representative imagery. It's symbolic. It's not meant to be taken literally. And that's crucial for understanding Dante's vision.
It is. It adds layers of meaning.
Absolutely. So as you reflect on all of this, on Dante's framework of heaven, what stands out to you?
Yeah, what parts resonate?
What aspects of it align with your own understanding of justice, of reward? And how does this whole concept of symbolic representation, how does that shape your interpretation of those celestial spheres?
It's not just about physical places, is it? It's about states of being, levels of understanding.
Exactly. And if you're intrigued by what we've explored today, if you want to see where Dante goes from here, I highly recommend checking out those higher heavens. There's the sphere of fixed stars, the prima mobile, and then the ultimate destination, the Empyrean. That's where Dante comes face to face with God.
Yeah, the culmination of the journey.
And you know what else can be really enriching? Just diving into the biographies of those historical figures that Dante places throughout Paradiso.
Yeah, learn more about their lives.
It gives you this deeper understanding of his judgments, of the values of his time. It's like a whole other layer to explore.
Absolutely. And in the end, Paradiso, it's more than just a theological text. It's this incredible poetic exploration of humanity's spiritual aspirations, this longing for connection with something greater than ourselves.
Yeah, that universal search for meaning.
Exactly. So as you continue to ponder these ideas, these images, we hope you find your own path towards a richer and more fulfilling understanding of everything.
Of it all.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through Paradiso.